Okay, so we're going for the true ending here. We're going to start from the beginning. I'm just going to hit the skip button. If you want to see the scenes, then you will need to see the main playthrough. So here you can see the first Temptress. You need to just let it go. I don't know if any of these truly do matter. And why is my mouse moving on its own? Oh, was that supposed to be like the game pulling me towards it, I wonder? So let's explain. Let's start making dinner. So yeah, the game is pulling you towards it, that's what that was. So, they're offering. So yeah, why is this a different scene? She'd written his name many times, frequently surrounded by hearts. In several places she'd drawn little pictures of herself killing Mrs. Smythe. It was playful though, and writing out her emotions made her feel a little more stable. Ah, so she's feeling more stable, that's what it is. Okay, we need to ignore the others and just find John. I like how they changed the word to targets when you highlight it. So let's just take John's idea and call it our own. She spent a while writing in her notebook. Many of its pages now heavy with ink. Though she wasn't a very good artist, she found it soothing to draw John's face. Perhaps that would be something to take up in the future. Ah. So yeah, I did enable the adult content thing here, so we'll see what scenes are enabled, because I know there's a scene here. Lizzie trusted completely that whatever he was working on was important, but she could also see that he was getting tired. John always tried to push himself too far, letting his energy run down, and often leading to him to become depressed again. Smiling to herself, Lizzie straightened. The library was empty. Maybe he needed something a little different. So, yeah. Lizzie smiled and approached him, making sure to make enough noise for him to hear. She wished that she was wearing something sexier than sweatpants and a t-shirt, but it would be fine. John looked up and smiled. Glad to see you. Nothing to do at home either, huh? I did everything already. You don't seem too busy either. She shifted her posture, leaning on his desk, and arching her back toward him strategically. Her smile shifted from pure happiness to pure desire. The effect was not lost on him. You look great, but, I am supposed to be working right now. You're supposed to help people who come to the library, right? I'm the only one who needs something right now. Without breaking eye contact, Lizzie slid an arm up one of her shirt sleeves and pulled the strap of her bra over her shoulder, then repeated with the other arm. John swallowed but kept watching as she reached behind her back and under her shirt, making it right up her stomach a little. Preparation complete, Lizzie undid the clasp and wriggled out of her bra, then pulled it from her shirt and held it dangling from one hand. John, don't make me have done all that for nothing. You can take a break, right? John swallowed and got to his feet quickly. Let's find a break room. They hurried in one of the small study rooms at the side of the library, Lizzie watching John smile and laughing softly. It was so nice to see him give in and play sometimes. The stateroom held nothing but bookshelves, 2 chairs, and a table. But the table was at about the right height and the edge was smooth, so that was good enough. Knowing he might feel guilty about hurrying, Lizzie took it upon herself to bend over the desk and slide her sweatpants part way down. John, hurry. I don't want to wait. Okay, so we'll cut that part out for you guys. There's no bombshell, sadly. No John calling out the wrong name or anything to make it exciting. But yeah, you get an achievement for it. There's one CG that goes with it, with a couple different variations. They cleaned up and pulled their clothes back on in a hurry, then headed back to the main desk. Anyone who saw them, bodies flushed, clothes askew, would have known exactly what they had done, and that fact made Lizzie immensely happy. There was no one there, of course. The library was every bit as empty as it had been before. She'd expect John to look relieved, but he actually didn't seem to care, just smiling at her. Do you want to stick around? I wasn't getting much done anyway. Sure. She spent the rest of his shift alongside him, occasionally reading, but often leaning against him and breathing his scent. She could still smell what they had done, and it was a wonderful reminder. Also wonderful was that the tension seemed to have been eased from him. Sex had been exactly what he needed, making Lizzie doubly glad that she had given in to her desires. When the shift finally ended, John locked up and they headed home together. As they walked, Lizzie was surprised to feel his hand slide down from her waist, caressing her curves. Maybe they weren't done after all. Lizzie eagerly pulled him home faster. So right here we just need to be quietly supportive, sacrificing our mental health, yada yada. Don't kill her yet. Talk to John. When I read these, I mostly just see you. This is who you are, and I can feel your love for me on every page. Sometimes very literally. He had leafed through to a page where she had drawn the two of them, naked, embracing one another. It was surrounded by sketches of models in various sexual positions. Lizzie had forgotten she'd drawn those, and found herself giggling. How flexible do you think I am, Lizzie? I just like thinking about us together. Ever since we had sex at the library, I've been thinking about other new things we might do together. Oh, but I don't mean it isn't wonderful just to do it normally. That's great to... Don't worry, Lizzie. I understand. So that's one of those reasons why you need to see the scene. So you get that extra bit of text, but I don't think it actually affects anything in case you wanted to get the wedding without having to enable that. So let's try explaining it. So they're actually going to talk about one of the things that was found. There is one thing from the notebook I want to discuss, John. It might take a long time. She saw a little hint of tension in his eyes, but he was always willing to work with her. Fortunately, in this case, that was unnecessary. Lizzie kept her smile off her face until she flipped to the appropriate page. I'd like to have a vigorous discussion of this part. John stared at the sketch of the sexual position, then chuckled, and the last of the tension flowed out of him. Sounds like a stimulating conversation. They spent the rest of the day in bed, exploring one another. Even as Lizzie enjoyed the pleasure, she was glad to let go of any nervousness about him discovering her notebooks. She also had a feeling that she wouldn't need them anymore. So yeah, there's quite a few extra lines here and there if you have the patch enabled and do the scene. Only then did Lizzie realize she had her knife in her hand. She had a strong instinct to shield John, defend him from the girl. She managed to restrain herself and set the knife aside, a few inches out of reach. You okay, Lizzie? I'll be fine, but we need to keep watching. Reflecting on her reactions, Lizzie scooted up against John and focused on the broadcast. This is right after the murder. As she calmed down, Lizzie was able to admit any real threat would likely be slower and social. Her calm also let her notice John's mood more precisely. It seemed like John was fine, though his eyes were very serious. He was always more prone to sadness, and she imagined his thoughts were grim, but they didn't seem to be crushing him. They sat there, both somewhat tense, until John glanced over at her with a slight grin. Your murderous laughter was much cuter. Ah. Lizzie threw herself into his arms, laughing. It had occurred to her to compare herself to the other girl, but John's words completely wiped out such thoughts. He was joking, but the fact he was able to joke so easily with her was a wonderful thing. Besides, there was probably a bit of truth in there too. She was better than that awful girl. So, we need to forget about it. Though part of her desperately wanted more information, she reminded herself that what she had said was true. This incident wasn't about them. She would learn more in time. She made her way across campus at speed towards the lab, and to her surprise she wasn't anxious. John was having fun. He'd be happy to see her, and things would be fine. There was no threat, not here. Is this the computer lab scene? I was wondering if the game would have varied any, but oh well. Ask John. So this is where she finds out about the plans for the wedding. And right here is after the revelation that they're going to roll out their detection system. John took a deep breath, but his eyes were still calm. Lizzie nestled against him to offer comfort, but she knew that they couldn't change the facts of the situation. So this is after her saying she can decapitate the problem. They at least got a slight smile from him, but the situation was obviously quite serious. Could be worse. It's not like society is going to change overnight. After all, the Warnos incident is still on everyone's mind, but they'll move on eventually. Does this change what you want to do? Should we do something different? No. I think we have to keep going as we have. Finish college, then we can build our life together. He reached out to take her hand and she gripped it back hard. I think I've seen enough for now. I don't know. I feel like I need to keep watching, but at this point it's just depressing me. I'll watch for you. You rest, John. I'll tell you if anything important happens. Are you sure? I don't want to make you shoulder it either. No, I'm happy to. The news might be bad, but I don't mind if I'm helping you feel better. Then I will take you up on that. Thanks, Lizzie. She helped tuck him into bed, kissed his forehead, and then headed back to watch late into the night. So at this point, you're now on the wedding room. By the next morning, Lizzie was feeling discouraged, not just about the situation, but about the reactions to it. Everyone was so stupid. There were protests in support of the law and protests against it. More protests that didn't seem clear on what they wanted except change. It was utter chaos, and the other direction of it all seemed to be downward. There was so much tension on everything, so little of it rational. According to reports, some schools had even expelled students based on the idea that they might be a threat, even though they had no true grounds to do so. Lawsuits had already begun. All of it seemed far away from their home and their life together, yet it loomed high and cast a shadow over her. She was grateful when she heard John finally getting up. He came out and gave her a quick kiss before sitting down beside her. She explained the basics of everything that had been reported, and putting it into words made things seem slightly more manageable, but it was still far from pleasant. John, do you think we need to call off the wedding? He looked into her eyes seriously for a long moment, not judging, just understanding. Eventually, he spoke quietly. Would you prefer that? No, something might happen. I don't think there's any real risk, but I don't want you to be unhappy, Lizzie. I want our wedding day to be something you can remember forever. So if now is a bad time, I think it would be better to do it, to prove that Koitek doesn't dominate our lives anymore, and it would make me happy. John, so happy. She stared into his eyes and realized that she was certain. She wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of her life with him. But she was afraid that someone would take him away somehow. Afraid of so many things. Will you tell me that everything will be alright, John? I can't promise that, but I don't think there's any serious chance of something going wrong. She smiled fondly, through her moist eyes and nestled closer against him. I'm glad you said that. You don't offer any false hope. I don't want you to be sad, but I'm glad you never tried to force things to be happy. Thank you. Please convince me, John. Tell me about everything, and why we can have our wedding, and I don't need to be afraid. John held her and began to speak, not making any grand promises, but just going over the situation. It all seemed so much clearer when he said it compared to the chaos of possibilities within her mind. Yes, things weren't perfect. Yes, there would be problems in their future, but with him by her side, Lizzie could hope that things would turn out well. All she needed to do was... So we need to stop worshipping him, if you remember what he said earlier. Lizzie held her John and he held her. They would always have each other. Finding peace again, Lizzie gradually fell asleep in his arms. At long last, it was time for their special day. After all their preparation, it somehow felt simultaneously as if it couldn't be happening already, and as if she had been waiting forever. Soon they would belong to each other in another way. Most of her concerns about something happening to somehow interrupt the wedding had faded away, though obviously she had brought her axe. But with John's calmness balancing her, she felt as though things would be fine. Arriving at the location they'd picked out made it all seem so much more real. She'd seen the pictures, but actually staying on the grounds was an entirely different experience. The garden area at the edge of town did a lot of weddings, and it was certainly beautiful. High hedge walls made the garden seem separated from the rest of the world, and even the offices were picturesque. Though Lizzie wanted to go see the actual area where they would be married first, apparently things were still being rearranged following a wedding before them. Instead, they headed into the offices to do a little paperwork, which Lizzie got out of the way as fast as possible to focus on what mattered. After that, they had to part, going in separate directions to get dressed. Lizzie held her dress tightly as she was directed to one of the side rooms. She had tried it on a few times, but John had never actually seen her wearing it. No, darling, get in here. An irritatingly young woman gestured for Lizzie to come. At first, Lizzie was angry about her presence, but she knew that it wasn't easy to get everything on her dress done properly on her own. Reluctantly accepting the necessity, Lizzie got fully dressed. Seeing herself in the mirror, she was quite pleased with the effect. The positive feelings were only slightly dampened by the assistant making comments about her. They were compliments, but Lizzie didn't care about her. She only wanted compliments from John. Unfortunately, the time it took for her to put on the dress wasn't long enough for the garden to be ready. The assistant left, leaving Lizzie to pace idly. She considered getting out her axe to see how she would look with it. She had a feeling that she would like the look. Hopefully, John would like it too. That brought to mind naughty ideas that made Lizzie giggle to herself. Sooner than she expected, the assistant returned. Now? Not yet, sorry. How much longer will it be? Sorry, the previous ceremony went long. Just as soon as everything is cleared up, you'll be able to step right in. I see. I'll go talk to John then. What? You can't let him see you before the wedding? Lizzie considered the tradition for a moment and decided that it was dumb, but the other woman seemed very serious about it, as if such superstitions made all the difference. Why not? It's bad luck. You don't want to get your married life off started on the wrong foot, do you? Lizzie paused, considering all the factors in her mind, then gave the woman a flat smile. I'm going to go for a walk in the garden, then. Don't get close to any of the workers. Ignoring her, Lizzie headed out. The grounds really were pleasant. She was glad they picked this location, but her purpose was not to go for a walk. Once she got out of eyesight, Lizzie circled back and made her way around the main building. Before they'd been split up, she obviously knew exactly where they'd taken John to wait. Comparing it to the map she had looked up of the building, she could easily determine where the room met at the outside wall. She didn't see anyone until she saw him through the window. John was alone, sitting in a room much like hers. Though he looked mostly calm, she could see the tension in his hands as he clasped them together. No doubt he was nervous about this too, and given her fears about this day, Lizzie had probably added to them. But she planned to reverse that trend very soon. Just not quite yet. Instead, she stayed outside the window staring at him just like she used to. The next time she'd be staring at her husband. Lizzie was sure that her smile had become something that was not comforting to most, but it didn't matter. She knocked on the glass and John jumped a little, whirling to look at her. But when he saw her, he immediately smiled. After checking the window a bit, he managed to open it. Everything okay, Lizzie? Everything's fine. It was just an awful woman saying boring things, and I got tired of it. Before he could object, she pulled herself through the window. Normally it would have been effortless, but the dress made things a little more difficult. Fortunately, John offered her his hand, and she was able to get in somewhat gracefully. They say it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. She walked past him and locked the door to the room. But I think that only applies to normal people. Brushing past him again, Lizzie lowered the blinds to cover the window completely, then turned to him with a smile. Would you like to see the bride? Really? Now? He glanced over his shoulder at the door as if she had just locked it, but he was smiling. After a moment, he turned back to her. You're beautiful, Lizzie. If you stay here, I don't think I'll be able to help myself. She grabbed the front of his suit and pulled him to her. I don't want you to. Lizzie pressed herself against him, ignoring the clothes between them, feeling his body against hers. His hands automatically came to rest on her waist, keeping her there as he bent to kiss her. She eagerly kissed back, first simply and romantically. Then after a while slipping her tongue into his mouth. One of John's hands slid down, cupping her ass through her dress and pulling her harder against him. Needing more, Lizzie pushed against him until he had to take a step backward, his back against the wall. That felt good, but what she wanted. John? So at the end of the scene, you get the bachelorette party achievement. And in case you're wondering, I'm gonna look at the CG to see if there's actually anything really bad in it. I think that may be tame enough to where I might be able to make the thumbnail. Unless we get a better one here, we'll see. As Gloria said it felt, it was a little awkward immediately afterwards. They struggled to right their clothes or remove any sign of what had happened. They both helped the other adjust, then smiled again. That was a lot better than just waiting. Wasn't it? Then I'll see you soon, won't I? Look surprised. Lizzie climbed back out the window, made sure her dress was still in decent shape, then headed back to her room. The assistant grumbled when she saw a few things askew, but Lizzie just smiled at her demurely and said that she had a nice walk. In a few minutes, everything was fixed and the preparations were finally done. The wedding was so soon, yet Lizzie wasn't nervous anymore. It was finally time. Lizzie stepped from the door and into the back garden, where there was a pathway of short grass lined with flowers. Normally there would be chairs filled with guests, but in their case it was empty. She let her eyes wander forward, wanting to drink it all in before she finally indulged. At the end of the pathway was an archway woven with white roses. The scene wasn't marred by many people. Only a pastor and a photographer, necessary evils, and then there was John, completing the image. Even though she had seen him wearing the suit not long before, it was completely different to see him standing there, waiting to marry her. He looked amazing. That was nothing compared to the look she saw in his eyes, though. He was looking at her as if it was for the first time and the millionth time. His eyes filled with such love that it nearly broke her heart. It took all her self-control not to run down the walkway toward him. She made herself walk slowly, savoring the moment till she finally drew beside him. They stood in front of the pastor, but she barely saw the other man. They had spent a long time talking about their vows, but in the end, they had gone with none. There was nothing they could say now that would match everything they had already promised one another. Besides, she doubted the pastor would appreciate her saying how many people she would happily murder for John's sake. With the ceremony simplified, it didn't take long. She ignored the words buzzing in the back of her mind, just staring at John until she heard the words that mattered. Do you, John Nichols, take Lizzie, Doss, to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Lizzie Doss, take John Nichols to be your lawfully wedded husband? Before the pastor could say anything about kissing the bride, Lizzie threw herself at John, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him fiercely. In that moment, everything fell away except the two of them. Nothing else mattered. She pulled back just slightly, staring into his eyes. She saw the past pain and sorrow there, yes, but she also saw hope and determination. She saw a love that matched her own. When they moved apart, she took his arm for the sake of the pictures, but those no longer mattered. When planning the wedding, Lizzie had thought that capturing this moment would be the most important part of the experience. Now she saw that it didn't matter at all. A picture could never compare to the fact that she would always have this moment, always have him. Forever. And there's your true ending. See, I don't remember how long the first game was, but this one is considerably shorter. Overall, there's not as much killing to be had, sadly. I mean, the game ends after you whack the two people. So there is that, but it gives you guys a little bit of closure, and you can see the defining romance of the channel. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So yeah, I think that is everything unlocked. I'm not going to bother opening the gallery to look, because I'd have to censor stuff, and yeah. So that was Crimson Gray, Dusk and Dawn. Something much requested, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. So I hope I'll see you guys in a future project, but until then, I am